My name is Kiara. I am 32 years old and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a vice president of data analytics, I escaped their toxicity but maintained occasional contact. Last Friday, they invited themselves to a lavish family dinner at my gorgeous Lake Lanier rental. Between the expensive wine and roasted salmon, my mother Yvonne leaned forward and smirked. You know, Kiara, your brother and his fiancée are moving into this lake house. Pack your things and leave, you parasite. I simply wiped my mouth with a linen napkin and smiled. The next afternoon, while my parents went to pick them up, I packed my belongings, ended the lease, and returned the keys. When they arrived, every access card flashed red. My mother called me 54 times, screaming for help. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. Growing up in Atlanta meant everything was about appearances. But inside our suburban home, emotional coldness permeated every corner. Our house was a fortress of expectations I could never quite meet. From elementary school through high school, I maintained straight A's and joined honor societies. None of my achievements ever mattered because I was not Malik. Malik was the golden child, the handsome athlete who could do no wrong. I was just the quiet girl who preferred coding over beauty pageants. My mother Yvonne made sure I knew my place. She was obsessed with the local country club scene and presenting the perfect image to her high society church friends. To her, a daughter working in tech was boring, but a son claiming to be a cryptocurrency and real estate mogul was something she could brag about. The fact that Malik was actually drowning in debt was a secret she fiercely protected. That brings us to last Friday evening. I had rented a stunning 5-bedroom modern house right on the edge of Lake Lanier. It was my sanctuary. I worked remotely and needed the peace and quiet. The property featured floor-to-ceiling windows, a private dock, and a massive kitchen. I paid a premium for the lease through my corporate LLC, but my salary easily covered it. My family, however, treated my home like their personal resort. Yvonne had insisted on hosting a family dinner at my house to celebrate Malik's upcoming wedding to Tiana. Tiana was an aspiring lifestyle influencer who came from a newly wealthy family. She wore too much perfume, spoke too loudly, and treated everyone like her personal staff. I tolerated the dinner because it was easier than fighting with my mother. We were sitting in my formal dining room. The sun was setting over the lake, casting a beautiful golden glow across the water. I had hired a private chef to prepare the meal, wanting the evening to be as smooth as possible. We were just finishing the main course when Yvonne tapped her silver fork against her crystal wine glass. The sharp ringing sound commanded immediate attention. I have an important announcement to make, Yvonne said, her chest puffed out with pride. She looked at Malik with absolute adoration before turning her gaze to me. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer contempt. Kiara, your brother and Tiana are getting married in 2 months. They need a proper home to start their new life together. A cramped apartment in the city is not suitable for a man of his stature. Therefore, they will be moving into this lake house. I set my fork down slowly. I looked around the table, waiting for the punchline. My father Desmond stared intently at his plate, refusing to make eye contact with me. Malik sat back in his chair with a smug grin, swirling the wine in his glass. Tiana was busy admiring her reflection in her phone camera. You are joking, right? I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. I hold the lease on this property. I live here. Yvonne let out a sharp, mocking laugh. I am completely serious. Why on earth does a single woman with no husband and no children need a 5-bedroom house on the lake? It is incredibly selfish of you to hoard all this space. You sit in your room all day staring at a computer screen. You do not even appreciate the view. Malik and Tiana are building a family. They have important guests to entertain. They deserve this place more than you. You need to clear out your home office and move your things into the basement by tomorrow. Or better yet, pack your bags and find a small studio apartment downtown. The sheer audacity of her demand left me momentarily speechless. I looked at Malik, expecting him to at least show a shred of embarrassment. Instead, he leaned forward and pointed a finger at me. Do not make this difficult, Kiara, Malik said, his tone dripping with arrogance. You have always been stubborn. You need to learn how to support your family. Black families sacrifice for the men to lead. That is how we build generational wealth. I need this house to impress my investors. You are just writing code. You can do that anywhere. I felt my heart rate steady. The anger that should have consumed me was replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. This was not a new dynamic. This was exactly how they had always treated me. Just like when you cried about missing your Spelman College homecoming. Malik continued, fully leaning into his cruelty. You threw a massive tantrum because mom needed your savings to bail out my failed record label. You survived missing one party. You will survive moving out of this house. Stop being a parasite and do something useful for your brother for once. His words triggered a visceral memory. I was 20 years old, working 2 part-time jobs to afford my tuition and save for homecoming. I had saved $3,000. Yvonne had somehow accessed my bank account, drained every single penny, and given it to Malik so he could rent a flashy studio space. When I confronted her, she slapped my face and told me a good sister would gladly fund her brother's dreams. I had missed homecoming, but I had learned a valuable lesson about financial security. I removed her name from all my accounts the very next day. Tiana chimed in, adjusting her massive Cartier bracelet so it caught the light from the chandelier. She looked around my beautifully decorated dining room with a critical eye. Honestly, Kiara, this decor is a bit depressing anyway. I am going to bring in my own interior designer on Monday. We are going to brighten the place up. You will need to put your little computers and messy wires in the garage. I cannot have my background looking cluttered for my brand deals. And please make sure your moving boxes are out of the way before my parents arrive tomorrow. We are hosting them for a welcome brunch here. They had planned this entire takeover behind my back. They had already arranged for furniture deliveries and invited guests to a home that did not belong to them. They assumed I would simply bow my head, pack my bags, and disappear into the basement like a dutiful, obedient servant. They believed my silence over the years was a sign of weakness. They did not understand that my silence was simply observation. I had been watching, learning, and building my own empire while they played pretend. Yvonne crossed her arms over her chest, staring me down like she used to do when I was a child. Well, she demanded, I expect you to have your room cleared out by noon tomorrow. Tiana's moving truck will be here at 1. Do not embarrass me by making a scene. I looked at my mother. I looked at the deep lines around her mouth, the expensive dress she had bought using my father's dwindling credit, and the absolute certainty in her eyes that she possessed ultimate authority over my life. I looked at Malik, a grown man who still needed his mother to steal from his sister so he could maintain a fake lifestyle. I looked at Tiana, a woman so blinded by greed and superficiality that she was willing to marry a fraud. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw my wine glass across the room, even though the urge was incredibly strong. The woman they were talking to, the frightened, eager to please daughter, had died a long time ago. The woman sitting before them was the vice president of data analytics for one of the largest cybersecurity firms in the country. I negotiated million-dollar contracts before breakfast. I dismantled hostile security threats for a living. These 3 were nothing more than a minor glitch in my system. I calmly picked up my linen napkin and dabbed the corners of my mouth. I placed the napkin neatly beside my plate. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly so it did not make a sound against the hardwood floor. I smoothed down the front of my silk blouse and offered them a serene, unbothered smile. You are absolutely right, I said, my voice smooth and pleasant. Parasites definitely should not live here. This house is meant for people who actually work for a living. I will have my things packed and out of the way. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. Yvonne looked momentarily confused by my easy compliance, but then her face split into a triumphant grin. I knew you would see reason, she said, taking a large gulp of her wine. It is about time you grew up and learned your place in this family. I turned my back on them and walked out of the dining room. I could hear Tiana immediately start talking about paint colors for the living room. I walked down the long, brightly lit hallway toward my master suite. My heels clicked rhythmically against the floorboards. With every step, a heavy weight lifted off my shoulders. I was not retreating, I was executing a protocol. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door softly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened my property management application. The lease for this beautiful lake house was not under the name Kiara. It was under Caldwell Vance Holdings, a corporate entity I fully owned and controlled. I had a premium corporate lease with a very specific early termination clause. I tapped the screen navigating to the lease settings. I selected the option for immediate emergency termination. A warning prompt popped up informing me that this action would incur a $10,000 penalty and immediately revoke all digital access to the property by noon the following day. I did not hesitate. $10,000 was a small price to pay for permanent peace of mind. I pressed confirm. The system updated instantly. A green checkmark appeared on my screen, followed by an automated message stating that the smart locks would be wiped and reset by property management in exactly 16 hours. I smiled in the quiet darkness of my room. My family thought they had successfully staged a hostile takeover. They had no idea I had just detonated the building with them inside. I packed a single overnight bag, grabbed my laptop, and quietly left. I drove straight to my actual home that Friday night, leaving my family sleeping comfortably in the guest rooms of the lake house. They falsely assumed I had retreated to the basement in a state of quiet defeat. In reality, I was sleeping incredibly soundly in my high-rise penthouse in Buckhead. I felt a quiet sense of triumph knowing I was finally taking back control. Saturday morning arrived with bright sunshine and clear skies, promising a beautiful and remarkably revealing day in Atlanta. I woke up early, feeling entirely refreshed, made myself a cup of dark roast coffee, and opened my laptop at my pristine kitchen island. As a cybersecurity expert, I never leave a property unmonitored. I quickly accessed the external security cameras of the Lake Lanier house through an encrypted connection. At exactly 9 in the morning, I watched the live high-definition video feed as my family marched out of the front door. Malik was wearing a ridiculously tight designer suit that I knew for a fact he could not afford. My father Desmond followed quietly behind him, struggling to carry their expensive leather luggage. Yvonne stepped out last, wearing an oversized, dramatic sun hat and directing Malik to bring the car around. They were heading to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport to pick up Tiana's wealthy parents. They desperately wanted to show off the lake house to prove that Malik was a highly successful cryptocurrency entrepreneur instead of a man drowning in secret debts. Malik proudly pulled a rented black luxury SUV into the driveway. I watched closely as they loaded into the vehicle, laughing and talking, completely oblivious to the fact that their grand illusion was about to shatter into a million pieces. The second their rented SUV turned the corner and disappeared from the camera feed, I initiated the next phase of my protocol. I picked up my phone and called a premium white glove moving service I had retained earlier that morning. I paid double their usual rate for an emergency expedited job, ensuring they would prioritize my request above all others. I gave the moving foreman the temporary access code to the front door and explicitly instructed him to clear out the master bedroom, the home office, and all the high-end tech equipment I had installed throughout the property. I drove back to the lake house to supervise the extraction personally, wanting to ensure nothing was left behind. When I arrived, the moving crew was already operating with incredible military precision. 10 men moved quickly and efficiently through the large house. They worked without asking questions, meticulously wrapping every piece of hardware to ensure nothing was damaged during the transition. I tipped them generously for their speed. They carefully packed my multiple curved monitors, my heavy-duty corporate servers, my custom ergonomic desk, and my entire personal wardrobe. I stood in the center of the spacious living room, watching them dismantle the life I had built in that house. I felt no sadness, no regret, and no hesitation, only a profound sense of liberation. For years, my mother had demanded that I make myself smaller to give Malik room to shine. She constantly wanted me to hide my computers in the garage so Tiana could have a perfect aesthetic background for her superficial social media videos. Now I was finally giving them exactly what they had constantly asked for: an entirely empty house. It took the dedicated moving crew exactly 3 hours to strip the house completely bare of my belongings. They loaded the final heavy box into their large truck, handed me the sign-off sheet, and drove away down the quiet suburban street. I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The master suite echoed with my footsteps. The home office was nothing more than a blank slate. I made absolutely sure not a single trace of my existence remained. I was erasing myself from their false narrative entirely. Once the moving truck was completely out of sight, I pulled out my phone to deal with the digital infrastructure. Paying the $10,000 early termination fee had already legally severed my corporate connection to the property, but I desperately needed to ensure the physical security matched the new legal reality. The lake house was equipped with a state-of-the-art smart home system that I had personally configured and maintained. Over the past 6 months, I had programmed Yvonne and Malik's fingerprints and custom passcodes into the front door keypad to allow them seamless access for their frequent weekend visits. I opened the secure administrator portal on my mobile application. With a few swift, deliberate keystrokes, I permanently deleted Malik's user profile. I completely erased Yvonne's user profile. I wiped all temporary guest codes and permanently disabled the biometric scanner that read their fingerprints. I then initiated the strict protocol to transfer the master control credentials back to the property management company, effectively locking myself out of the system as well. There was no going back now, and I felt nothing but absolute certainty. I stood on the wooden front porch and listened intently as the heavy-duty smart lock on the thick oak front door clicked loudly, officially sealing the house. The circular keypad ring, which usually glowed a welcoming bright blue, immediately shifted to a solid, unforgiving dark red. The house was no longer mine, and it was certainly not theirs. It was now a vacant, highly secure corporate property. I confidently walked down the steps to my car, got in, and drove back toward the bustling city of Atlanta. By 2 in the afternoon, I was safely back in my Buckhead penthouse. My apartment featured panoramic views of the sprawling Atlanta skyline, gleaming marble countertops, and the kind of authentic, quiet luxury my mother spent her entire life pretending to have. I poured myself a generous mimosa, sat on my deep velvet sofa, and placed my phone face up on the glass coffee table. I felt a deep sense of peace washing over me as I anticipated their reaction. I knew the exact schedule of their day. They would pick up Tiana's pretentious parents from the airport, take them to a lavish lunch at a trendy, expensive restaurant in the city, and then drive them up to Lake Lanier for the grand reveal of Malik's supposed wealth. I took a slow, satisfying sip of my drink, savoring the fresh orange juice and crisp champagne, waiting for the inevitable explosion. At exactly 2:45, my phone screen lit up brightly. The caller ID displayed Yvonne's name in bold black letters. I calmly let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started ringing again. Over the next 15 minutes, my phone absolutely exploded with frantic notifications, 10 missed calls, 20 missed calls. Text messages began pouring in, frantic, angry, and terribly misspelled. I watched the messages flash rapidly across my screen. Where are you? Why is the door locked? The guests are waiting. Call me back right now. By the time the missed call counter hit, exactly 54, I decided I had let them sweat long enough in the Georgia heat. I swiped the green button and answered the phone. Kiara Yvonne screamed into the receiver, her voice shrill with absolute panic and fury. What is wrong with the front door? The keypad is flashing red. Tiana's parents are standing in the sun, and Malik cannot get his fingerprint to work. Give me the new passcode right now. We are standing outside and it is 90 degrees. I leaned back comfortably against my soft sofa cushions. I moved out like you asked, I replied, my voice steady and completely unbothered. You told me to pack my bags and leave my own house, so I did exactly that. I terminated the lease and returned the property to the landlord. They locked the house. Enjoy the view from the driveway. There was a moment of dead, stunned silence on the line before Yvonne erupted into an absolute frenzy. They were finally facing the consequences of their own toxic actions. Are you out of your mind? Tiana's father is a millionaire. We are supposed to host them for a lavish welcome brunch inside. We have expensive caterers arriving in 10 minutes. Open this door immediately, or I am going to find a heavy rock and break a window to get in. You are ruining your brother's life. I smiled, listening to her escalating desperation. I would not do that if I were you, Mom, I warned her gently. The property management company takes vandalism very seriously, and they have an automatic unyielding response protocol for break-ins. What are you talking about? She shrieked, her voice echoing loudly through my phone speaker. Through the phone, underneath the sound of my mother's heavy, panicked breathing and Tiana's high-pitched whining in the background, I heard it. The unmistakable piercing blare of police sirens pulling up to the driveway. I sat on my velvet sofa, listening to the chaotic symphony unfolding on the other end of the phone. The loud, authoritative voices of the police officers cut through Yvonne's hysterical screaming. Malik, always needing to perform his fragile masculinity, especially in front of Tiana's wealthy parents, was making everything exponentially worse. I could hear him yelling at the officers, demanding they step off his property, claiming he was a successful cryptocurrency investor who owned the entire block. The police, completely unimpressed by his rented designer suit and loud voice, asked for identification and immediate proof of residence. Malik, of course, had absolutely nothing. His driver license listed my parents' suburban address, and his name was nowhere on the digital property registry. When Malik realized he was losing face in front of his future in-laws, he became violently belligerent. He puffed out his chest and shoved one of the responding officers. It was a monumentally stupid decision. The sound of a brief scuffle echoed through the phone speaker, followed by the sharp metallic click of handcuffs. Tiana's mother shrieked in absolute horror as the police slammed Malik against the hood of a patrol car and read him his rights. Yvonne, trying to physically pull the officers off her precious golden child, was immediately detained for obstructing justice and trespassing. The line went dead shortly after. I placed my phone back on the glass coffee table and poured myself another mimosa. I knew the exact protocol of the local police department. They would transport them to the precinct, process them, and eventually grant them a phone call. I had plenty of time to take a long, relaxing shower change into a tailored emerald green pantsuit and gather my corporate legal documents. 2 hours later, my cell phone rang again. It was an incoming call from the county jail. I answered on the first ring. Kiara Yvonne sobbed into the receiver. The arrogant, commanding tone she had used at the dinner table last night was completely gone. She sounded small, terrified, and desperate. "You have to come down to the precinct right now. They locked Malik in a holding cell. They fingerprinted me." Tiana and her parents followed the police cruisers, and they are sitting in the lobby demanding answers. "You have to come down here and tell the police it was a misunderstanding. Tell them it is Malik's lake house. Lie to them so he does not get a criminal record. Please, Kiara, he is your brother." I listened to her desperate pleas, feeling a profound sense of clarity. For 32 years, I had been the family scapegoat, expected to absorb the consequences of their terrible decisions. They wanted me to commit a crime, to lie to federal authorities, all to protect the illusion of Malik's success. I did not raise my voice. I simply said, "I will be right there." I drove my sports car to the downtown precinct. The heavy glass doors slid open, and the chaotic energy of the police station hit me instantly. I walked into the crowded lobby and immediately spotted the disaster. Tiana was pacing back and forth near the vending machines, her face stained with ruined makeup. Her wealthy parents sat rigidly on a plastic bench, looking absolutely disgusted by their surroundings. My father, Desmond, who had apparently avoided arrest by staying quiet during the altercation, was slumped in a chair, holding his head in his hands. I walked directly to the front desk. A tired-looking desk sergeant looked up from his computer. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked me. "My name is Kiara Caldwell," I said clearly, ensuring my voice carried across the quiet lobby. "I am the sole owner of Caldwell Vance Holdings. I was notified that trespassers were arrested at my corporate rental property on Lake Lanier earlier today. I brought the official lease agreement and the digital access logs to verify the trespassing charges." Tiana stopped pacing. Her head snapped toward me. Her parents stood up from the bench, their eyes wide with confusion. Desmond looked at me, his face pale and defeated. The desk sergeant took my thick folder of legal documents and began reviewing them. "Wait a minute," Tiana said, marching over to the front desk. Her voice trembled with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "What do you mean, your corporate property?" "Malik told my parents he bought that lake house in cash using his cryptocurrency profits. He said you were just his unemployed sister, who he let stay in the basement out of pity." I turned to face my future sister-in-law. I looked at the massive, ostentatious diamond ring sparkling on her finger. I felt a fleeting moment of pity for her, but she had chosen to participate in my eviction last night. She needed to hear the truth. Tiana, I said, maintaining steady eye contact. My brother does not own a lake house. He does not own a cryptocurrency firm. He does not even own the luxury Range Rover he drove you in today. My parents took out a high-interest second mortgage on their own house just to buy that car for him to keep up his fake appearances. I am a vice president of data analytics. I lease that house with my own money. Malik is broke and he is currently sitting in a dirty holding cell because he tried to illegally break into a property he has absolutely no legal right to enter. Tiana's mother gasped loudly, clutching her expensive leather handbag to her chest. Her father shook his head in absolute disgust. "We are leaving," her father announced, his voice booming with authority. "Tiana, gather your things. I will not have my daughter marrying a common street fraud." Tiana looked from me to her parents, the reality of her shattered aesthetic lifestyle finally sinking in. She looked down at her left hand. With a swift, furious motion, she pulled the heavy diamond engagement ring off her finger. She marched over to my father Desmond and threw the ring forcefully against his chest. It bounced off his shirt and clattered onto the dirty linoleum floor. "The wedding is completely off," Tiana declared loudly. "Tell your fraudulent son to never contact me again." She stormed out of the precinct doors, her parents following closely behind her. Desmond slowly bent down and picked up the discarded ring, staring at it like it was a foreign object. Just as the glass doors swung shut behind Tiana's family, the heavy metal door leading to the holding cells opened loudly. A police officer escorted Yvonne out into the lobby. Her designer sun hat was gone, her hair was disheveled, and she looked thoroughly exhausted. The police had processed her release paperwork, recognizing her as a secondary participant in Malik's aggression. Yvonne spotted Desmond holding the discarded ring. She looked at the empty space where Tiana's family had been standing. Then she looked at me, standing tall and pristine in my emerald suit, holding my corporate documents. The realization of what had just occurred hit her like a freight train. Instead of recognizing the massive error of her ways, instead of apologizing for trying to make me homeless, Yvonne chose blind rage. Her eyes widened with absolute fury. She lunged toward me across the police station lobby, her hands curled into tight fists. The desk sergeant immediately stood up, his hand resting on his utility belt, shouting a stern warning. "You ruined everything," Yvonne screamed, struggling against Desmond, who had quickly grabbed her arms to pull her back. "You just ruined your brother's entire life." Tiana's father was going to pay off Malik's $600,000 debt as a wedding gift. "We needed that marriage. We needed that enormous financial bailout. You selfish, ungrateful child." I stood perfectly still as her words echoed off the concrete walls of the police precinct. $600,000. The number rang in my ears like an alarm bell. I stared at my mother, watching her chest heave as she sobbed into my father's shoulder. The puzzle pieces suddenly violently snapped together in my analytical mind. The sudden demand for me to move out of the lake house, the desperate need to impress Tiana's wealthy parents, the aggressive push to accelerate a wedding that was originally planned for next year, the rented luxury cars, and the second mortgage on their suburban home. This entire situation was never truly about living space or honoring the men in the family. It was a frantic, terrifying cover-up. Malik was not just pretending to be rich. I was deeply, dangerously in debt, and my parents were actively helping him orchestrate a fraudulent marriage to secure a massive financial bailout from a wealthy family. They were willing to sacrifice my home, my peace, and my safety to clean up a $600,000 mess that Malik had created. This was no longer just about real estate and respect. I spent the rest of my weekend locked inside my high-rise penthouse, running every possible scenario through my analytical mind. I knew my mother and father were desperate, but I severely underestimated the absolute depths of their moral depravity. Monday morning arrived with heavy rain pouring relentlessly over the sprawling Atlanta skyline. I drove my sports car to the corporate headquarters of Caldwell Vance Holdings, eager to immerse myself in complex data algorithms and entirely escape the lingering toxicity of my family. My executive office is located on the 40th floor of a highly secure commercial building in Midtown Atlanta. Accessing this floor requires a specialized corporate keycard and advanced facial recognition software. I was right in the middle of reviewing a massive international cybersecurity contract when my desk phone buzzed loudly. It was the lobby security guard sounding incredibly stressed and completely overwhelmed by the chaotic situation downstairs. He quickly told me that my parents were causing a massive scene at the front desk. They were aggressively threatening to call the local news stations and loudly scream about my supposed corporate abuse if I did not let them upstairs immediately. Knowing Yvonne was fully capable of staging a humiliating public spectacle, I reluctantly authorized temporary visitor passes just to get them out of the highly visible public lobby. A few tense minutes later, my heavy glass office doors swung open violently, hitting the wall. Yvonne marched in looking like a woman who had not slept in several days. Her usually pristine hair was frizzy, and her expensive clothes looked terribly wrinkled. But what immediately caught my sharp attention was my father, Desmond. Desmond had always been a passive, quiet man who strongly preferred to blend into the background, while my mother orchestrated her relentless social climbing schemes perfectly. Today, however, he looked physically ill and completely broken. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. His breathing was incredibly shallow, and his eyes darted around my spacious modern office with absolute terror. Yvonne slammed her heavy designer purse onto my pristine mahogany desk, completely disregarding the expensive computing equipment surrounding her. She did not bother with basic greetings or standard pleasantries. "You need to fix this massive disaster right now," she demanded, her voice sharp, frantic, and echoing off the glass walls. "You ruined absolutely everything at the police precinct on Saturday afternoon. Tiana has completely blocked Malik on every single social media platform. Her wealthy father officially pulled his promised financial support. You entirely destroyed your brother's only chance to marry into money and clear his ruined name. Now you are going to take full financial responsibility for your incredibly selfish actions and use your corporate salary right now today. You have to pay off Malik's debt immediately," she shrieked. I slowly leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, keeping my posture perfectly relaxed, despite the emotional chaos they brought into my professional sanctuary. "I ruined his chance to marry into money?" I asked very calmly, raising a single skeptical eyebrow. Mom, Malik is a 35-year-old man who tried to fake his way into a wealthy family by pretending my leased corporate lake house belonged to him. He got himself rightfully arrested for trespassing and assault. I simply arrived and told the police the absolute truth. You cannot possibly blame me, because his fraudulent house of cards finally collapsed under the weight of his own profound stupidity. Desmond gripped the sleek edge of my desk, his rough knuckles turning pale white from the extreme pressure. "Kiara, please," he stammered, his voice cracking with an unfamiliar dark desperation. "We really do not have time to argue about who did what to whom. We are completely out of time. You make an exorbitant amount of money at this corporate company. We clearly see the tailored clothes you wear and the luxury cars you drive. If you do not pay them today, we are all going to lose absolutely everything we have ever built." I stared at my father, genuinely stunned by his sheer audacity. "You want me to empty my personal bank accounts to save Malik from the devastating consequences of his own financial illiteracy?" I asked, keeping my tone deadly quiet and incredibly firm. "Absolutely not. I work 80 grueling-hour weeks, managing massive data infrastructures. While I was building my corporate empire, Malik spent his time renting luxury cars. He could not afford to impress women he did not love. My hard-earned money stays with me." Yvonne slammed her hands on the desk again, leaning over to glare at me with a terrifying, desperate intensity. "How can you be so incredibly heartless?" she screamed, her face turning a dark, angry shade of red. "He is your own brother. Black men have it hard enough out here in this unforgiving world, and you are actively tearing him down instead of lifting him up. You should be using your massive corporate success to build a sturdy platform for him. You are a disgusting traitor to this family." You sit up here in your high tower judging us acting like you are better than your own blood family. You are punishing him just because you are a miserable, lonely woman who cannot keep a man. I did not flinch at her cruel words or her pathetic insults. Her transparent attempts at emotional manipulation had lost their power completely forever. I stood up tall, resting my palms flat on the desk, bringing my face perfectly level with hers. I lift up people who actually work, I said, my voice cutting through her hysterical rant like a frozen steel blade. I actively mentor young Black women in advanced technology fields. I provide generous scholarships for dedicated students who study hard and show up early. Malik simply does not work. Malik is a complete fraud. He has never held a real job in his entire adult life because you always swoop in to save him from experiencing any real failure or holding any personal accountability today. You created this entitled monster, Mom. You fiercely enabled his toxic entitlement. Do not ever dare weaponize his race or our supposed family bond to guilt trip me into paying for his wildly reckless mistakes. The large room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence right then. Suddenly, the tense silence was completely shattered by a loud, wretched sob. I looked over and saw my father Desmond collapsing heavily into one of my sleek, modern guest chairs. He buried his wrinkled face in his trembling hands, weeping openly and loudly. It was a jarring, deeply unsettling sight that made my anxious heart race slightly right then. Desmond had never cried in front of me, not even when his own beloved parents passed away years ago. Kiara, you truly do not understand, Desmond cried out, his broad shoulders heaving with every single ragged breath. He did not just borrow money from a normal, traditional bank. No legitimate banking institution would ever approve him because his credit score is completely destroyed. He went directly to a private lending group operating in the city. They are extremely shady, unregulated, and incredibly dangerous people running a massive, violent criminal underground syndicate. They do not send polite collection letters in the mail, Kiara. They send violent men to your house to permanently break your legs. My analytical mind immediately started rapidly processing this new terrifying variable in the complex equation. A private lending group, I asked, feeling a cold, sharp spike of pure adrenaline pumping through my veins. How much money did he borrow exactly right now, Dad? Tell me the exact number right now so I know what we are dealing with. Desmond slowly looked up at me, his tired eyes bloodshot and filled with absolute undeniable terror. $600,000, he whispered, the massive monetary number hanging in the quiet air like a sudden death sentence. $600,000. I felt the breath quickly leave my lungs. How on earth did an unemployed, arrogant fraud secure a $600,000 loan from a dangerous private criminal syndicate? I demanded, my voice rising slightly with disbelief. They would absolutely require massive financial collateral to approve that. You and Mom clearly do not have that kind of equity left in your suburban house. You already took out a second high-interest mortgage just to buy his luxury car. What valuable asset did he possibly use for collateral to secure this massive cash loan today? Desmond could not meet my furious gaze. He looked down at the polished hardwood floor, his entire body shaking violently. I did not use our suburban house, Desmond admitted, his voice barely a raspy whisper echoing in the quiet room. He used you. The solid ground beneath my expensive heels seemed to suddenly tilt. When the ruthless lenders demanded a high net worth co-signer with verifiable corporate income and flawless credit, your mother stepped in. Yvonne illegally forged your own signature on the loan documents. The words hung in the air like a physical blow, but I did not panic. I am the vice president of data analytics for a top-tier cybersecurity firm. Panic is an emotion reserved for people who do not understand how to manipulate complex digital systems. I looked at Yvonne, who was refusing to make eye contact, and then back at Desmond, whose face was slick with sweat. I calmly stood up, walked over to the heavy glass door of my office, and locked it with a sharp click. I turned around and pointed a commanding finger at the guest chairs. Sit down and show me the fraudulent paperwork right now, I demanded. Desmond reached into his damp raincoat and pulled out a thick manila envelope. His hands were shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. I snatched the envelope, pulled out the stack of legal papers, and spread them across my mahogany desk. The documents bore the official logo of a notoriously predatory private equity group well known in Atlanta for operating on the edge of the law. I flipped straight to the final signature page. I studied the blue ink carefully. The forgery was incredibly sloppy. Yvonne had attempted to mimic the sharp, aggressive loops of my signature, but the pen pressure was entirely wrong. A blind person could clearly see it was a frantic, desperate imitation. I looked up at my mother, feeling a cold, calculating anger completely replace my shock. You really thought a counterfeit signature on a high-risk $600,000 private loan would simply fly under the radar? I asked her, staring directly into her eyes. Yvonne crossed her arms defensively, attempting to regain some fraction of her shattered maternal authority. Malik assured us he would double the money in his cryptocurrency portfolio. Within 3 months, she argued, her voice trembling slightly. He promised he would pay it completely off before the ruthless lenders ever had to verify the cosigner details. He just needed quick initial liquidity to secure a massive block of digital assets. He was going to buy you a luxury sports car to say thank you, Kiara. I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed off the glass walls. You committed federal wire fraud and tied my pristine credit score to violent loan sharks based entirely on the financial promises of a man who cannot even afford his own basic rent. This was an unbelievable betrayal of my trust. The immediate threat to my personal safety and my immaculate financial standing was incredibly real and terrifying. If Malik defaulted on this massive sum, these ruthless underground lenders would absolutely come after my corporate bank accounts, my diverse investments, and my luxury properties. I had to neutralize the dangerous threat immediately. I sat back down in my ergonomic chair, pushed the fraudulent papers aside, and opened my heavily encrypted laptop. I did not need to rely on the local police or a slow-moving bank fraud department to figure this out. I had unrestricted access to the most sophisticated forensic tracing software in the modern financial sector. Give me his exact cryptocurrency wallet addresses and his primary banking routing numbers right now. I commanded, my fingers hovering gracefully over the glowing mechanical keyboard. Yvonne hesitated, clutching her expensive designer purse tightly against her chest. I am not letting you hack your own brother and ruin his private accounts. She snapped, her eyes flashing with stubborn defiance. He just made a bad investment in a volatile digital market. We just need to help him bounce back like a true family should. Desmond slammed his fist onto the arm of his chair, finally finding a tiny fraction of his backbone. Give her the account numbers, Yvonne. He yelled, his voice raw with pure, unadulterated desperation. They are going to take our suburban house and break our physical legs. We do not have a choice anymore. Startled by his sudden, rare outburst, Yvonne quickly recited the banking details she had memorized for his deposits. I began typing rapidly, running a deep diagnostic trace on the complex financial pathways. I effortlessly bypassed the standard public ledgers and utilized proprietary corporate software specifically designed to track international money laundering schemes. Lines of complex green code cascaded down my dual monitors, illuminating my focused face. The numbers told a very clear, undeniable story of extreme financial deception. As I watched the digital transactions compile on my high-resolution screen, a dark, familiar memory suddenly surfaced in my mind. 5 years ago, our beloved grandmother was battling a severe illness and desperately needed expensive experimental treatments. The extended family had carefully pooled together $10,000 in a dedicated medical fund to save her life. Malik was temporarily managing the savings account because Yvonne insisted he needed financial responsibility. One rainy afternoon, he claimed his laptop was maliciously hacked by foreign cybercriminals who stole every single penny of grandmother's crucial medical money. Yvonne threw a massive emotional pity party for him, loudly claiming poor Malik was the helpless victim of a sophisticated digital attack. She forced the entire extended family to forgive him and focus purely on his emotional recovery instead of holding him legally accountable for the missing funds. I was a junior data analyst at the time, and I specifically asked to see his laptop to trace the supposed malicious hack. Yvonne vehemently refused to let me touch his computer, fiercely guarding his fabricated victimhood with maternal rage. She aggressively enabled his toxic deceit back then, and she was aggressively enabling his massive fraud right now. The consistent pattern of lies had always been there, hiding in plain sight under Yvonne's fiercely protective wing. Malik was not a tragic victim of a volatile financial market. Malik was a calculated, dangerous predator who fed on his own family. I focused on the glowing screens blocking out my parents' nervous breathing. I easily traced the massive $600,000 loan from the predatory lenders directly into Malik's personal checking account. The staggering amount of money did not move to a cryptocurrency exchange as he falsely claimed. It never touched a digital coin platform or blockchain network at all. Instead, I watched the data trail show the stolen funds being funneled through 3 different shell companies in a layering technique. I ran a quick reverse lookup on the corporate registration documents and tax identification numbers. All 3 bogus shell companies were officially registered under slight variations of Malik's middle name and his old college fraternity details. He never lost a single dime in the cryptocurrency market, I announced, my eyes locked firmly on the undeniable, irrefutable data. Desmond slowly looked up, his face, pale gray and slick with cold, nervous sweat. "What exactly do you mean he never lost the money?" Desmond asked, his voice barely a terrified whisper. "Where did the $600,000 go?" Kiara. I highlighted the final transaction block on my screen and hit the enter key to initiate a geographical IP address trace. I watched the digital tracking icon bounce rapidly from Atlanta to a secure offshore server in the Cayman Islands before finally landing directly back in the southeastern United States. The final destination of the massive cash transfer popped up on my screen in bright glowing green text. I clicked on the associated public property records to verify the exact purchase details. "Malik did not invest your borrowed money in the future of digital technology," I said, feeling a ruthless, victorious smile form on my lips. "He used the entire $600,000 to purchase a luxury beachfront condo in Miami, Florida. He bought the expensive property entirely in cash under a carefully hidden LLC just 2 weeks ago." Yvonne gasped loudly, jumping up from her leather chair in absolute shock. "He bought a luxury house for him and Tiana?" she asked, a desperate, pathetic spark of hope lighting up her tear-filled eyes. "He secured a beautiful vacation home for his new bride to surprise her." I shook my head slowly and turned my large computer monitor around so they could clearly see the vivid high-definition screen for themselves. I opened the official property registry, which prominently included the names of the authorized full-time residents. "He did not buy the condo for Tiana," I replied, watching my mother's hopeful face completely shatter into a million jagged pieces. "He bought it for a woman named Jasmine." I swiftly pulled up her public social media profile, which was linked directly to the new property address. The screen instantly filled with recent date-stamped photos of a beautiful young woman posing provocatively on a sunny Miami balcony. She was standing proudly inside the exact luxury condo Malik had just purchased with the stolen underground money. And just to add the absolute perfect finishing touch to his ultimate betrayal, Jasmine was wearing a very specific custom Cartier bracelet in her latest very glamorous photos. It was the exact same luxury diamond bracelet Tiana proudly wore on her wrist, thinking it was a rare one-of-a-kind expensive gift from her wealthy, loving fiancé. Malik had completely betrayed his gullible parents, his future wife, and his entire future, all to fund a secret, extravagant life by the beach. I sat in my locked office staring at the digital evidence of my brother's ultimate betrayal. He had manipulated my parents into risking their home and safety while he lived a luxurious double life in Miami. My mother Yvonne enabled his financial crimes by forging my signature on dangerous loan documents. They expected me to blindly pay off a massive syndicate debt out of misguided loyalty. I closed the property registry tabs on my monitors. I felt no fear. I only felt cold, tactical determination to dismantle their fraudulent reality. I was a cybersecurity expert trained to neutralize hostile threats. My family had become the most hostile threat I had ever faced. I picked up my phone. I needed to execute a flawless social engineering tactic. I had to play the exact role my mother demanded. I had to become the submissive, guilty daughter who recognized her proper place in the hierarchy. I dialed my mother's number. She answered, her breathing heavy. Kiara, she snapped, her voice sharp with desperation. Have you come to your senses? Are you going to pay the private lenders and save your brother? I took a deep breath and forced my voice to sound shaky and small. Mom, I am so sorry, I whispered, faking a tone of terrified compliance. You were right. I was being selfish. But I spent the last hour looking through my accounts. I found a way to access the $600,000 without triggering a tax audit. I can save the family today. I heard a loud gasp of relief from Yvonne. I knew you would do the right thing, Kiara, she said, her tone shifting to smug validation. You finally understand that family comes first. Black families have to stick together to survive. When can you transfer the funds to his account? My corporate financial compliance department requires physical signatures on the wire transfer authorization forms for any amount over $500,000. I need you, Dad and Malik, to meet me for dinner tonight. We can review the transfer process together and sign the legal paperwork. I will bring my laptop and a portable projector to walk you through the secure transaction. Yvonne agreed. I told her I would text the restaurant details and instructed her to bring Malik and Desmond. I ended the call and allowed myself a cold smile. The first phase of my setup was in motion. However, the trap would not be completely sprung without the final essential piece. I needed Tiana in the room. Tiana was the catalyst for their frantic timeline. Malik was using this fake wedding to secure her wealthy father's money. Tiana needed to see exactly who she was planning to marry. I dialed Tiana's personal cell phone number. She answered with an annoyed sigh. What do you want? Tiana demanded, her voice dripping with extreme irritation. Your fraudulent brother already embarrassed my parents at the police precinct. My father officially canceled the wedding. I have nothing to say to your family. Tiana, please just listen to me for 1 minute, I pleaded, injecting fake desperation into my voice. Malik is completely devastated. He wants to make a grand public apology to you and your parents tonight. The police precinct incident was a massive misunderstanding about a corporate lease. Malik is actually incredibly wealthy. He has a multi-million-dollar hidden technology portfolio that he wants to reveal to you tonight to prove his genuine financial worth. He is too ashamed to call you himself, so he begged me to reach out. I heard Tiana's breathing hitch over the phone line. Her greedy, superficial nature was instantly hooked by the mere mention of a multi-million-dollar portfolio. A hidden technology portfolio? She asked, her voice softening significantly. Why did he not just tell my father about this money at the police station today? Because the digital assets were locked in a secure offshore server during the weekend, I lied effortlessly, weaving technological jargon to confuse her. He just regained full access this afternoon. He wants to project his entire financial portfolio on a screen tonight at dinner to prove he can provide the luxury lifestyle you deserve. Please, Tiana, just come to dinner. If you do not like what you see, you can walk away forever. But he wants to prove his love to you properly. Tiana was silent for a long moment, carefully calculating the potential financial benefits. Fine, she finally agreed. Text me the exact location. But if this is another embarrassing stunt, I am blocking all of your numbers permanently. I ended the call and immediately began organizing the venue. I could not host this specific meeting at a casual restaurant. I needed an environment that catered to elite clients, providing absolute privacy and strict security. I contacted the manager of an exclusive restaurant located in the wealthy Buckhead district of Atlanta. I booked their premier private dining room under my corporate account. The room featured thick soundproof walls, heavy mahogany doors, and a state-of-the-art audiovisual system already built into the high ceiling above our heads. I spent 3 hours meticulously preparing my digital presentation. I downloaded every high-resolution photo from Jasmine's social media page. I compiled the offshore shell company registration documents highlighting Malik's fake corporate identities. I formatted the property deed for the luxury Miami beachfront condo, ensuring the $600,000 cash purchase price was displayed in large, bold red text. I arranged the slides to perfectly tell the undeniable story of his financial deception. I saved the presentation to a secure encrypted flash drive and packed my sleek silver laptop into my professional leather business briefcase. I left my corporate office at 6 in the evening and drove my sports car to the upscale restaurant. The private dining room was breathtakingly elegant. A long, polished oak table sat in the center surrounded by plush velvet chairs. Soft ambient lighting created an atmosphere of refined wealth. I connected my laptop to the room's hidden audio-visual system and lowered the large projector screen at the far end of the table. I ran a quick test to ensure the vivid images of Malik's secret Miami life would display brightly and clearly. Everything was functioning absolutely perfectly without any flaws. I took my seat at the head of the long table, ordered a glass of sparkling water, and waited patiently for my guests to arrive. At exactly 7 o'clock, the heavy mahogany doors swung open. Yvonne walked in first, holding her head high and wearing an expression of supreme, arrogant triumph. She was dressed in a flashy designer pantsuit, clearly eager to celebrate her successful manipulation of my finances. Desmond followed closely behind her, his eyes scanning the luxurious room with a mixture of quiet relief and lingering exhaustion. Malik strolled in last, wearing a fresh tailored suit and a confident, smug grin. He looked like a man who firmly believed he had just successfully dodged a massive bullet. None of them noticed Tiana sitting quietly in the plush velvet chair in the dark corner of the room. I had specifically instructed Tiana to arrive 15 minutes early and wait silently. I wanted her to hear exactly how my family spoke when they thought she was not around. Yvonne walked directly up to the table and placed her expensive handbag next to my laptop. She looked down at me with a condescending maternal smile. "I knew you would remember your place in this family, Kiara." Yvonne gloated, her voice echoing loudly in the private soundproof room. "I told your father you just needed a few hours to calm down and realize your duties. We brought our driver licenses for the bank wire transfer documents. Let us get this money moved quickly, so Malik can finally get his life back on track and fix things with Tiana's family." Malik chuckled softly, adjusting his expensive silk tie. "Do not worry about Tiana," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Her father is just angry about the police station mix-up. Once I show them the bank transfer receipt proving I have $600,000 in liquid cash, they will come crawling right back. Tiana loves the lifestyle I provide too much to ever walk away from me." From the dark corner of the room, Tiana let out a sharp, furious gasp. She stood up abruptly, stepping into the soft ambient light. Malik's smug, confident smile instantly vanished from his face. Yvonne gasped, clutching her chest in shock. Desmond took a sudden step backward. "What is she doing here?" Yvonne demanded, turning to glare at me with sudden intense suspicion. "You said this was a private family meeting to sign the financial transfer papers." I stood up slowly from my plush velvet chair at the head of the long oak table. I maintained steady, piercing eye contact with my mother, refusing to let up the small black presentation remote from the polished oak table. I smiled a cold, ruthless smile that completely unsettled the arrogant energy in the quiet room. "Oh, I know exactly what my proper place is right now," I said, my voice perfectly calm and dangerously quiet. "My place is right here, exposing the dark truth. Let us all look at Malik's secret portfolio together." I pressed the small button on my presentation remote, and the room instantly darkened. The large, motorized projector screen hummed quietly as it lowered from the ceiling at the far end of the long mahogany table. I watched the confident, arrogant smiles completely vanish from my family members' faces in real time. They were expecting to see complex cryptocurrency charts and massive offshore bank balances, proving Malik was a financial genius. Instead, the high-definition projector illuminated the dark room with a stark, crisp image of an official government document. It was a certified property deed, registered in Miami-Dade County, Florida. I used my laser pointer to highlight the purchase price section of the legal document. $600,000 paid entirely in cash just 2 weeks ago. I announced, my voice echoing clearly in the silent room. I moved the bright red laser dot down to the ownership details. And as you can clearly see right here, this luxury beachfront property was not purchased by a legitimate technology firm. It is officially registered to a secretive holding company managed exclusively by my brother. Yvonne squinted at the bright screen, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. "What is this, Kiara?" she demanded, her voice tight with rising anxiety. "Malik told us his money was locked in international digital assets. Why are you showing us a real estate document from Florida?" Malik sat completely frozen in his plush velvet chair. His face had drained of all color, turning a sickly pale gray. His jaw hung slightly open, but no sound came out of his mouth. He looked exactly like a cornered animal, realizing the trap had violently snapped shut. Desmond leaned forward, staring intently at the massive dollar amount displayed on the glowing screen. He recognized that exact $600,000 figure immediately. It was the exact amount borrowed from the ruthless underground lending syndicate. I did not answer my mother right away. I simply pressed the forward button on my remote. The property deed disappeared from the large screen, replaced instantly by a vivid, high-resolution photograph. It was a recent date-stamped image pulled directly from a public social media profile. The photo featured a stunningly beautiful young woman with flawless makeup and long flowing hair posing provocatively on a sun-drenched balcony. The spectacular ocean view behind her was unmistakable. She was standing on the exact balcony of the Miami beachfront condo Malik had just purchased in cash. "Who is this woman?" Tiana asked, her voice trembling slightly as she stepped entirely out of the dark corner of the room. She walked slowly toward the glowing screen, her eyes wide with mounting horror. "She is definitely not a real estate agent." I clicked to the next slide. This slide featured a collage of 4 different photos from the same social media account. I introduced the woman on the screen. "Her name is Jasmine," I stated clearly, maintaining intense eye contact with Malik. "She is a bottle service waitress from a nightclub in South Beach. According to her very detailed, very public daily posts, she has been in a deeply committed romantic relationship with Malik for the past 2 years." Tiana gasped loudly, stumbling backward until her back hit the solid oak wall. "2 years," she whispered, her voice cracking with raw devastation. "We have been engaged for a year and a half." "Let us look a little closer at Jasmine's incredible lifestyle," I suggested, tapping the remote again. The projector zoomed in heavily on Jasmine's left wrist in the most recent photograph. The image was incredibly sharp, highlighting the expensive jewelry she wore. Jasmine was proudly sporting a thick diamond-encrusted Cartier bracelet. Tiana let out a sharp, strangled cry. She instinctively reached down and grabbed her own right wrist. Earlier this year, Malik had gifted Tiana a highly specific designer bracelet, loudly claiming he had it custom-made exclusively for her by a private jeweler in Europe. It was supposed to be a rare, one-of-a-kind symbol of his immense wealth and unique devotion to her. The massive high-definition screen proved it was nothing more than a duplicate purchase. He had bought matching luxury bracelets for his future wife and his secret mistress. The heavy, oppressive silence in the private dining room shattered violently. Tiana erupted into a spectacular, furious rage. She grabbed the full glass of expensive red wine resting on the table directly in front of my father. With a guttural scream of pure, absolute betrayal, she hurled the dark crimson liquid straight into Malik's face. The red wine splashed forcefully against his skin, soaking his crisp, tailored shirt and dripping messily down his expensive silk tie. "You disgusting, pathetic, lying coward!" Tiana shrieked, her voice vibrating with intense, unadulterated fury. "You promised my father you were a legitimate millionaire. You let my family pay for our engagement parties and luxury vacations, while you were funding a secret double life in Florida with some nightclub waitress. You are completely broke." Malik sputtered wildly, wiping the stinging red wine from his eyes with his shaking hands. "Tiana, baby, please let me explain," he pleaded, his voice pathetic and entirely unconvincing. "Those photos are completely taken out of context. It is just a corporate investment property. I swear to you I was going to sell it and put the profits toward our wedding." Tiana did not hesitate. She picked up her heavy designer purse from the floor and swung it fiercely, catching Malik hard on the shoulder. "Do not ever speak to me again," she yelled, storming violently toward the heavy mahogany doors. She threw them open and marched out of the restaurant, leaving a trail of furious, destructive energy in her wake. The heavy doors slammed shut with a deafening thud, isolating my family in the tense room once again. Yvonne immediately jumped out of her chair, running to Malik's side. She grabbed a cloth napkin and began frantically dabbing the dark wine stains on his ruined suit. "Kiara, turn that projector off right now." Yvonne commanded, screaming at me with irrational protective maternal rage. You have completely ruined your brother's life. You deliberately invited Tiana here to humiliate him and destroy his upcoming marriage. You are a vicious, jealous monster. How could you possibly do this to your own blood? I slowly walked away from the head of the table and stood directly in front of the glowing projector screen. I looked at Yvonne and Desmond, forcing them to face the undeniable hard truth of their golden child's actions. I did not ruin his life, Mom, I said, my voice cutting through her hysterical screaming with cold precision. He ruined his own life, and he planned to drag all of us down into the dirt with him. I pointed a firm, steady finger at the screen displaying the property deed. He did not lose that borrowed money in a bad cryptocurrency market crash. He never made a single digital investment. He explicitly stole that $600,000 from those dangerous underground lenders. He willingly let you forge my legal signature on the financial documents to use me as his personal human shield. Desire for self-preservation is a powerful thing. I continued pacing slowly across the thick carpet. He knew those violent loan sharks would absolutely come looking for their missing money by the end of this month. His master plan was incredibly simple. He was going to let you and Dad lose your suburban house. I was going to let those criminals destroy my pristine credit and come after my corporate assets. He planned to let our family go bankrupt and face violent consequences while he boarded a flight to Miami and lived happily in a luxury condo with his side piece. Malik pushed Yvonne away roughly, standing up from his chair. The wine dripping from his chin made him look pathetic, but his eyes still held a desperate, arrogant defiance. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and snarled at me, showing his true vicious colors. You think you are so incredibly smart? Kiara Malik spat, his chest heaving with aggressive energy. You think showing a few Instagram pictures changes anything? You cannot prove any of this to those underground lenders. The corporate holding companies are entirely registered offshore. The financial transactions are totally buried in complex layers of international wire transfers. Those loan sharks do not have the sophisticated technical capacity to trace that money. They are just street thugs. You are still legally on the hook for the forged loan documents. I smiled a genuine smile. I did not send this presentation to the underground lenders, I replied, tapping my laptop keyboard lightly. I sent it directly to the IRS and the FBI field office. And look, I said, gesturing toward the heavy mahogany doors, they are right on time. Heavy, authoritative footsteps echoed loudly in the restaurant hallway outside our private dining room. The heavy mahogany doors swung open with a forceful push that made the crystal glasses rattle. 5 men and 2 women stepped into the private dining room. They were dressed in sharp tactical suits bearing the stark yellow letters of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The restaurant manager hovered nervously behind them before quickly pulling the doors shut to seal us inside. The lead agent, a tall, imposing man, walked directly to the head of the oak table. He did not look at me or my parents. His sharp eyes locked immediately onto my brother. "Are you Malik Caldwell?" the lead agent asked, projecting absolute, undeniable authority. Malik took a clumsy step backward, stumbling against his chair. His arrogant swagger was completely gone, entirely replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. "Yes," Malik stammered, his voice pitching an octave higher than normal, "but there is a massive mistake. I am just having dinner with my family." The lead agent pulled a thick folded document from his interior jacket pocket. "There is no mistake, Mr. Caldwell. We have a warrant for your immediate arrest on multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Please place your hands behind your back." 2 agents flanked Malik, immediately grabbing his arms. Yvonne let out a blood-curdling scream, acting as if she were watching her son being attacked. She rushed forward, trying to wedge herself between Malik and the agents. "You cannot take him," Yvonne yelled, waving her arms. "He is a legitimate businessman. He is going to be married. You have the wrong person. He just made a few bad investments." The lead agent gently pushed Yvonne aside, motioning for another agent to keep her restrained. "I strongly advise you to step back, or you will be charged with interfering with an arrest." Malik struggled weakly against the firm grip of the agents. His eyes darted wildly around the room, searching desperately for any escape route. He looked at the glowing projector screen, still displaying the undeniable proof of his expensive Miami beachfront condo. The absolute reality of his devastating situation finally crashed down, crushing his fragile ego completely. He was not a brilliant financial mastermind. He was a cornered criminal caught red-handed. In a moment of sheer pathetic panic, Malik showed his vicious colors. The golden child, the man who had been worshipped and protected his entire life, decided he was not going down alone. He planted his feet firmly on the carpet, refusing to walk, and twisted to point a shaking finger directly at my parents. "It was not just me," Malik screamed, his voice echoing off the walls with pure cowardly desperation. My parents knew absolutely everything about the private loans. They helped me secure the underground funds. My mom forged the financial documents. She illegally signed my sister's name to get the money released. I was just following her instructions. "You need to arrest her too." The entire room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Even the federal agents paused momentarily, surprised by the sudden betrayal. I stood quietly watching the horrific scene unfold with cold, analytical precision. I looked directly at Yvonne. Her jaw dropped open, and all the color drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly and hollow. The fierce maternal rage that fueled her seconds ago instantly evaporated, replaced by absolute soul-crushing devastation. Her own son was eagerly throwing her under a massive bus to save his own skin. I was feeding her to the federal authorities without a single second of hesitation or remorse. As I watched Yvonne's heart visibly shatter into a million jagged pieces, a sharp, vivid memory from my past flared brightly in my mind. I was exactly 16 years old. Malik, who was 19 at the time, had secretly taken our father's brand new sedan for a joyride. He lost control of the vehicle and crashed heavily into a neighbor's brick retaining wall. Malik panicked and ran back, leaving the wrecked car behind. When the local police arrived at our front door to investigate, Yvonne did not hesitate to protect her precious son. She pointed a firm, accusing finger directly at me. She looked the police officers right in the eyes and convincingly lied, stating that I had stolen the car keys while everyone was sleeping. I cried and begged her to tell the truth. But Yvonne demanded I accept the blame so Malik would not lose his upcoming college athletic scholarship. She told me it was my fundamental duty as a black woman to protect my brother. I took the blame. I spent my entire summer working minimum wage jobs to pay for the property damage while Malik went to college parties. I learned that night that my mother would gladly watch me burn to keep Malik warm. Now, 16 years later, the tables were turning in the most poetic way possible. The golden child was ruthlessly burning his own carefully constructed pedestal and taking his devoted creator down into the flames with him. Yvonne stared at Malik, her eyes wide with total disbelief. "Malik, how could you say that?" she whispered, her voice trembling with intense, raw agony. "I did everything to protect you. I gave you everything I had." Malik did not look remorseful. He looked angry and impatient. "Tell them the truth, Mom," he demanded, struggling against the handcuffs biting into his wrists. "Tell the agents you forged Kiara's signature on the loan papers. Tell them you orchestrated the financial cover-up. I am not taking the fall for this entire family. I am not going to federal prison because you people wanted me to be rich and successful." The lead agent nodded to his team, signaling them to move. "We will have plenty of time to discuss everyone's level of involvement during the official interrogation," the agent stated firmly. "Let us go, Mr. Caldwell." The agents pulled Malik forcefully toward the heavy mahogany doors. He kicked and thrashed, knocking a velvet chair backward onto the floor. He continued screaming accusations at our parents, his voice growing increasingly faint as they dragged him down the long restaurant hallway. The heavy doors swung shut behind him, leaving a tense, suffocating void in the private dining room. Two federal agents had remained behind, standing near the entrance with stoic, professional expressions. One of the agents, a woman with a sharp, observant gaze, pulled out a small notepad and turned her attention directly to my mother. Yvonne Caldwell, the female agent, said, her tone completely devoid of any sympathy or emotion. "Based on the explicit verbal statements just made by the primary suspect and the preliminary digital evidence provided to our field office, you are officially under active investigation for severe financial conspiracy and felony forgery." We strongly advise you not to leave the greater Atlanta metropolitan area. We will contact you shortly for a formal interview regarding your exact role in the fraudulent loans. Yvonne swayed on her feet, looking as if she had just been physically struck by a heavy, blunt object. She reached out blindly, trying to grab the edge of the long oak table for physical support, but her trembling fingers slipped off the polished wood. Desmond, who had been sitting frozen in his chair during the entire chaotic ordeal, suddenly let out a sharp, agonizing gasp. He grabbed the center of his chest, his face twisting in sudden, intense physical pain. His breathing became incredibly shallow and erratic, sounding like harsh, wet rasps in the quiet room. Desmond tumbled out of his plush chair, hitting the carpeted floor with a heavy, sickening thud. He curled into a tight fetal position, clutching his chest and groaning loudly in sheer agony. "Dad," I yelled, dropping the presentation remote and rushing immediately to his side. The federal agents quickly stepped forward, utilizing their emergency medical training. "Call an ambulance right now," the female agent commanded into her shoulder radio. "We have a male experiencing severe cardiac distress. Paramedics needed urgently." Yvonne dropped to her knees beside Desmond, but she did not touch him. She hovered awkwardly, her hands shaking uncontrollably as her eyes darted frantically between my gasping father lying helplessly on the floor and the unyielding federal agents blocking the exit. The luxurious, perfect facade she had proudly spent her entire adult life meticulously building had burned completely to ashes. She slowly turned her head and looked directly up at me. Her face was stained with dark, ruined makeup and tears of absolute desperation. The arrogant, commanding matriarch was entirely gone. She desperately reached out and grabbed the hem of my tailored emerald green pantsuit, firmly clutching the expensive fabric. "Kiara," she sobbed, her voice cracking and pleading as she looked up at me. "Kiara, please, you simply have to help us now. You are a successful corporate executive. You make millions of dollars at your technology company. You have to pay for the absolute best criminal defense lawyer in the city. You have to pay the massive hospital bills. You absolutely have to save us from this horrible nightmare right now." I looked down at the pathetic, weeping woman, clutching the hem of my tailored emerald green pantsuit. Her manicured fingers were trembling violently, leaving dark, tear-stained smudges on the expensive fabric. Yvonne had spent my entire life demanding my complete submission and commanding absolute authority over every single aspect of our family dynamic. Now she was groveling on the floor of a private dining room, begging the daughter she despised to save her from the devastating consequences of her own toxic creation. I did not feel a single ounce of sympathy. I slowly reached down and firmly peeled her shaking fingers off my clothes one by one. I stepped back, creating a distinct physical boundary between my hard-earned success and her criminal desperation. "You called me a parasite," I stated, my voice echoing sharply in the quiet room. "You kicked me out of the home I paid for just so your fraudulent son could impress his superficial fiancée. You illegally forged my name to saddle me with a $500,000 debt to dangerous underground criminals. I will not spend a single cent to keep you out of prison." Yvonne gasped loudly, her eyes widening in pure horror as the absolute finality of my words crashed down on her. The heavy restaurant doors burst open as 3 emergency paramedics rushed into the room carrying medical equipment and a portable stretcher. The federal agents immediately stepped back, giving the medical professionals plenty of space to work. The paramedics quickly assessed Desmond, who was still curled tightly on the carpeted floor, clutching his chest and taking rapid, shallow breaths. They swiftly loaded my gasping father onto the stretcher, securing him with thick, heavy straps. Yvonne scrambled to her feet, attempting to follow the medical team as they rushed Desmond out of the building. The female federal agent grabbed Yvonne by the arm, firmly reminding her that she was still under active investigation and needed to remain available for official questioning. I calmly picked up my sleek silver laptop and placed it securely inside my professional leather briefcase. I walked out of the restaurant, ignoring the stunned whispers of the waitstaff and the flashing lights of the ambulance idling near the entrance. I got into my sports car and followed the loud, blaring sirens through the dark, rain-slicked streets of downtown Atlanta. I drove to the emergency room at Piedmont Hospital strictly because Desmond was still my biological father. He had been a weak, passive enabler his entire life, but I needed to know his exact medical status. I parked my car and walked into the bright, sterile hospital lobby. An hour later, a tired-looking emergency room doctor approached me in the waiting area. He informed me that Desmond had not suffered a massive fatal heart attack as we initially feared. His heart was actually physically healthy. The intense, terrifying chest pain and rapid breathing were the direct result of a severe acute panic attack brought on by sudden extreme emotional stress. His nervous system had completely overloaded when the terrifying reality of federal prison and violent loan sharks hit him all at once. The doctor explained that Desmond would survive, but he needed to be kept overnight for careful cardiac observation and stress management. I walked directly to the hospital billing department on the main floor. I pulled out my corporate credit card and paid for Desmond's entire emergency room visit, the ambulance transport, and his overnight observation room in full. I did not pay the expensive medical bills because I wanted to buy their love or earn their elusive approval. I paid the high hospital costs simply to prove a point to myself. I secured his health, but my financial generosity officially ended there. Yvonne eventually arrived at the hospital lobby, having been temporarily released by the federal agents pending formal charges. She spotted me standing near the billing counter and immediately rushed over. Her eyes darted frantically around the busy room. "Kiara, you have to listen to me," she pleaded, grabbing my arm. The agent seized Malik's bank accounts. "We have absolutely no money left to hire a good lawyer for the upcoming federal hearings. You just paid the hospital bill, so I know you have the cash available. Please just write me a check for the legal retainer. We can fix this entire situation if we just stick together as a family." I smoothly pulled my arm out of her frantic grasp. I looked at her with an expression of pure, icy indifference. Paying a hospital bill to ensure a man does not die from a panic attack is basic human decency. I explained, my voice completely flat. Paying a high-priced criminal defense attorney to keep a manipulative forger out of federal prison is enabling toxic behavior. I already told you my answer at the restaurant. You made your bed with your golden child. Now you get to lie in it with him. I turned my back on her and walked confidently out of the hospital's sliding glass doors. I stepped out into the cool, crisp night air and took a deep, refreshing breath. The heavy, suffocating weight of my toxic family expectations was finally gone forever. Over the next few weeks, the severe legal and financial consequences of their actions rapidly accelerated. Malik was completely denied bail during his initial federal court hearing. The judge rightfully deemed him a massive flight risk due to his offshore bank accounts and the secret cash property in Miami. The golden child was forced to sit in a miserable federal holding cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit while he awaited his official criminal trial. With Malik locked away and his fraudulent assets completely frozen, the dangerous underground lending syndicate aggressively turned their attention to the co-signers on the loan. Since I had quickly provided the authorities with undeniable proof that my signature was illegally forged, the violent loan sharks focused all their terrifying energy entirely on Yvonne and Desmond. They began making threatening phone calls to the house late at night. They sent intimidating men to park dark vehicles outside my parents' pristine suburban property. To avoid having her legs broken by ruthless criminals and to secure a bottom-tier defense attorney for her looming federal forgery charges, Yvonne was forced to aggressively liquidate everything she owned. She completely drained the last remaining funds from her and Desmond's retirement accounts. She sold her expensive designer jewelry and her luxury handbags to local pawn shops for pennies on the dollar. But the massive syndicate debt was simply too large. The drained retirement funds barely covered the mounting legal fees and the initial interest payments required by the dangerous private lenders. Yvonne was ultimately forced to face her absolute worst nightmare. She had to put her beloved suburban house up for a rapid foreclosure auction to pay back the remaining criminal debt. The house was the physical manifestation of her arrogant superiority over her church friends and country club associates. Losing that specific property was a fate worse than death for a woman obsessed with superficial appearances. She desperately tried to secure traditional bank loans to save it, but her credit was ruined by the federal investigation. 3 months later, the legal hammer finally dropped. To avoid serving actual time in a federal penitentiary for the loan document forgery, Yvonne was forced to accept a harsh plea deal from the district attorney. She received 5 years of strict probation, a massive financial fine, and a permanent felony record. She narrowly avoided a prison cell, but she was left completely and utterly broke. Desmond remained a broken, passive shell of a man entirely unable to work due to his newly developed severe anxiety issues. Their entire fraudulent empire had burned to the ground exactly as I predicted. The highly anticipated foreclosure auction date for their suburban home finally arrived. I monitored the public county real estate listings from the comfort of my luxury penthouse office. I watched the digital auction clock count down the final minutes. Yvonne was scheduled to be officially evicted in just 3 days. Despite losing her golden child, her retirement savings, and her pristine reputation, Yvonne remained wildly delusional and fiercely arrogant right up to the very bitter end. She simply refused to accept the devastating reality of her complete social and financial downfall. On the morning the auction officially closed, Yvonne hosted a small gathering of her wealthy church friends in her half-empty living room. She carefully poured them cheap tea and smiled a fake tight smile. She lied to their faces with practiced ease, trying desperately to save her shattered pride. "I am definitely not losing my beautiful home," Yvonne proudly announced to her highly skeptical friends, her chin held extremely high. "A very wealthy private investor is buying the house today to let me rent it back at a discount. God always favors the righteous, and He is definitely protecting my family." I parked my sleek black luxury sedan discreetly down the street from my childhood home. From my quiet vantage point, under the cool shade of a massive oak tree, I had a perfect unobstructed view of the sprawling suburban driveway. The morning the foreclosure auction officially closed dawned bright and clear over the affluent neighborhoods of Atlanta. In a normal, rational world, a person facing the complete loss of their primary residence would be absolutely frantic. They would be surrounded by tall stacks of cardboard boxes, aggressively taping up their personal belongings, and desperately figuring out the grueling logistics of moving. But I knew my mother Yvonne far better than she knew herself. I watched through my heavily tinted windows as 5 expensive vehicles slowly pulled up and parked along the manicured curb. She had not packed a single solitary box. I knew exactly what was happening inside that grand brick house. She was hosting a lavish praise and worship brunch gathering in her pristine living room. This house was the ultimate symbol of her vanity. It was the heavily mortgaged fortress where she had spent decades making me feel incredibly small, while she falsely elevated Malik into a flawless golden god. Over the past 3 months since her humiliating federal plea deal, Yvonne had completely convinced herself that her manipulative charm and relentless prayers had magically secured a secret philanthropic investor. She confidently told everyone in her elite church circle who would listen that this anonymous wealthy savior was going to buy the house at the public foreclosure auction and simply rent it back to her for absolute pennies on the dollar. She truly believed her own elaborate lies. She was completely trapped in a severe state of narcissistic delusion. She had entirely rewritten the narrative of her felony conviction. To her wealthy social circle, she was just a fiercely loving mother who made a tiny administrative paperwork error to save her innocent son. In her twisted mind, I was the vicious, greedy daughter who cruelly abandoned her in her hour of greatest need. She basked in their misplaced sympathy, feeding her fragile ego with their constant unearned validation. I sat comfortably in my leather driver's seat checking my expensive silver wristwatch. The digital county auction was scheduled to officially close at exactly 12 o'clock noon. I had already set up an automated bidding algorithm through my highly secure corporate financial accounts. I watched the digital timer on my laptop screen count down the final seconds. At precisely noon, the winning confirmation email popped onto my screen. Caldwell Vance Holdings LLC was now the sole legal owner of the massive suburban property. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling an immense wave of ultimate vindication wash over my entire body. I picked up my cell phone and dialed a specialized legal courier service I had kept on retainer all week. I gave them the green light to proceed with the final phase of my strategic plan. Less than 30 minutes later, I watched a plain white delivery vehicle turn onto the quiet suburban street, followed closely by two marked police cruisers from the Fulton County Sheriff's Department. They parked directly in front of the house, effectively blocking in the luxury cars of Yvonne's wealthy church friends. The sight of the flashing blue police lights reflecting off the grand brick exterior of the house was absolutely poetic. I slowly opened my car door and stepped out into the warm Georgia air, smoothing down the front of my sharp-tailored charcoal gray business suit. I carried a sleek silver clipboard in my left hand. I motioned for the burly demolition contractor I had hired earlier that morning to follow me. He stepped out of his truck wearing a bright orange high-visibility vest and carrying a professional laser measuring tool. We walked slowly and deliberately up the long concrete driveway, staying just a few paces behind the legal courier and the two large uniformed sheriff's deputies. The legal courier marched firmly up the front porch steps and knocked heavily on the thick wooden door. I stood silently on the manicured front lawn, watching the scene unfold with cold, analytical precision. The heavy door swung open, revealing Yvonne. She had smoothed down the front of her elegant floral dress and wore her most charming, welcoming smile. She fully expected to greet a corporate representative bearing a generous, flexible lease agreement. Instead, she found herself standing face to face with a stern legal courier and two armed law enforcement officers. Her bright, welcoming smile faltered slightly, but she quickly tried to recover her arrogant composure. "You must be the representatives for the new owner," Yvonne said, using her most charming, sweet voice. "You can bring the rental paperwork right inside the house. We have hot coffee and fresh pastries waiting in the living room." The legal courier did not smile back. He did not step over the threshold. He simply handed Yvonne a bright yellow legal document securely attached to a heavy clipboard. "I am not here with rental paperwork, Ma." The courier stated, his voice projecting loudly enough to carry straight into the formal living room, where all her elite friends were watching closely. "I am a court-appointed processor serving you with an official 3-day notice to vacate the premises. The property was successfully purchased at public auction 30 minutes ago. The new legal owner requires immediate and total possession of the entire property. You have exactly 72 hours to remove all your personal belongings and vacate the premises entirely, or you will be forcibly removed by law enforcement." Yvonne stared at the bright yellow paper in her trembling hands. The warm color rapidly drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly and hollow. She blinked several times as if trying to clear a sudden terrifying blur from her vision. "No, you are making a massive mistake," she stammered, her voice pitching higher with sudden, undeniable panic. "There is a private arrangement in place. The new investor bought this house specifically to lease it back to me. We have an unspoken understanding. I am a prominent, respected member of this community. I am absolutely not moving out." The taller of the two sheriff's deputies stepped forward, resting his hand casually on his thick utility belt. "There is no mistake, and there is absolutely no rent-back agreement on file anywhere, Ma," the deputy said firmly. "The foreclosure sale is completely finalized. The deed has been legally transferred today. If you are still inside the structure at noon on Tuesday, we will return to physically escort you off the property, and your remaining possessions will be placed directly on the public curb. You need to start packing your belongings immediately." Desmond slowly appeared in the wide doorway, standing just behind Yvonne. His face was pale and slick with cold, nervous sweat. He looked over Yvonne's shoulder at the devastating legal notice. Yvonne's breathing became incredibly harsh and highly erratic. Her carefully constructed delusion was violently collapsing right in front of the very people she was trying so desperately to impress. I could clearly hear her church friends whispering quietly among themselves, their eyes wide with profound shock and sudden harsh judgment. Their superficial support was instantly evaporating in the face of her absolute public humiliation. "Who bought it?" Yvonne demanded, her voice cracking, as raw, unadulterated terror finally broke through her stubborn denial. She aggressively grabbed the clipboard from the courier's hands, flipping frantically through the thick stack of legal documents. "Who is the investor? I demand to speak to them right now. I will call them myself and clear up this ridiculous misunderstanding immediately." The courier reached out and pointed a firm finger at the bold black text printed clearly at the very top of the official property deed. The new owner is a corporate entity, May M. the courier stated, maintaining his stoic professional demeanor. The property was purchased entirely in cash by Caldwell Vance Holdings LLC. They assumed total legal ownership at exactly 12 o'clock today. Yvonne froze completely. The expensive yellow paper slipped from her trembling fingers and fluttered slowly to the hardwood floor. She recognized that specific corporate name instantly. It was the exact same corporate LLC name printed on the lake house lease I had used to orchestrate my brilliant exit strategy months ago. Desmond let out a soft, terrified groan, gripping the heavy wooden doorframe for physical support. Just as the devastating reality of the corporate name fully registered in Yvonne's frantic mind, I confidently stepped forward from the edge of the manicured lawn. I walked calmly up the concrete front steps, stopping just a few feet away from the porch. The sheriff's deputies glanced at me, but quickly recognized my professional authority. Yvonne stared at me, her eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated horror. She looked at my sharp business suit, my silver clipboard, and the burly demolition contractor standing silently at my side. The absolute silence on the front porch was deafening. I looked directly at my mother, my expression perfectly serene and utterly unapologetic. I believe the officers just informed you that you were given exactly 3 days to vacate the premises. I said, my voice projecting clearly and smoothly over the quiet suburban lawn, ensuring every single person inside the house could hear me perfectly. But I am here right now to take the preliminary demolition measurements. Yvonne stood completely frozen on the top step of her grand front porch. The elegant floral dress she had carefully chosen for her victory brunch suddenly looked entirely out of place against her pale, terrified complexion. Her eyes darted wildly from the heavy silver clipboard in my hand to the burly demolition contractor standing quietly behind me. The heavy silence hung over the manicured lawn for several agonizing seconds before her fragile reality violently shattered. A loud, piercing shriek ripped from her throat, echoing down the affluent suburban street. "You are absolutely insane!" Yvonne screamed, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated panic. "You cannot do this to me. This is my home. This is the house where I raised you. You cannot just buy it out from under me and threaten to tear it down." The well-dressed women from her elite church circle began hastily shuffling out the front door. They kept their heads down, tightly clutching their designer handbags, completely eager to escape the humiliating public spectacle. Yvonne desperately reached out to grab the arm of her closest friend, a woman named Beatrice. "Please tell them they cannot do this." "Beatrice," Yvonne pleaded, her eyes wide and frantic. "Tell the sheriff they are making a massive mistake." Beatrice gently but firmly pulled her arm away from my mother's shaking grasp. She did not offer a single word of comfort. She simply hurried down the driveway and got into her luxury sedan, leaving Yvonne entirely alone to face her terrifying new reality. Yvonne spun back around to face me, her polite maternal mask completely gone. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure vicious hatred. "You are a cold-blooded monster," she spat, gripping the wooden porch railing so tightly her knuckles turned bright white. "You orchestrated this entire situation just to publicly humiliate me in front of my community. You waited until the very last second to reveal yourself because you are a sick, vindictive child. I brought you into this world, and this is how you repay your own mother. You cannot do this to your own mother. I will not leave this property. I will chain myself to the front door before I let you take my home." I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I stood perfectly still on the concrete walkway, radiating absolute stone-cold authority. I looked directly into the frantic eyes of the woman who had spent my entire life trying to make me feel incredibly small. "I am not the monster here, Mom." I stated, my voice perfectly level and completely devoid of any sympathy. "You did not care about making me homeless when you arrogantly demanded I pack my bags and vacate my lake house just so Malik could pretend he was wealthy. You did not care about burying me in a massive amount of dangerous criminal debt when you deliberately forged my legal signature on those fraudulent loan documents. You were perfectly willing to let violent loan sharks break my legs and destroy my pristine corporate career just to protect your precious golden child." The two sheriff deputies stood silently on the lawn, their hands resting casually on their utility belts, closely monitoring the escalating confrontation. Desmond remained slumped in the doorway, looking like a deflated ghost. He did not utter a single word to defend his wife or his home. He simply stared blankly at the perfectly manicured grass, completely broken by the overwhelming consequences of his lifelong passive enabling. I took a slow, deliberate step closer to the porch, holding my silver clipboard firmly against my side. I bought this property legally at fair market value during a public county auction. I continued, ensuring my voice carried clearly across the quiet yard. I used my hard-earned corporate funds to clear the massive crippling debt you and Malik incurred with those dangerous underground lenders. By purchasing this house today, I effectively saved your physical lives. The violent criminals you owed money to have been fully repaid, and they will no longer come looking for you. I settled your incredibly reckless financial mess. But you absolutely do not get to live here anymore. You exhausted your free ride the exact second you decided to commit federal forgery using my name. Yvonne gasped, her hands flying up to cover her mouth. Her eyes darted frantically around the property, taking in the pristine landscaping. The grand brick columns and the large custom windows she had bragged about for over a decade. "But what are you going to do with it?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and lingering entitlement. "You live in a luxury high-rise penthouse in Buckhead. You do not even like the suburbs. Are you just going to flip my beautiful house to some wealthy investor for a quick, massive profit? Are you destroying my life just to make a few extra dollars?" I smiled, a calm, chilling smile. "I am not flipping this property for a quick financial profit," I revealed, watching her face intently. "I have zero interest in living inside these walls. This house has always been a toxic, suffocating monument to your shallow vanity. It was a fake fortress where you worshipped Malik and actively punished me for being independent. So I am going to completely erase it from existence." Yvonne stared at me in total confusion. "Erase it," she whispered, shaking her head slowly in disbelief. "What does that even mean?" I held up my silver clipboard, revealing a thick stack of official city planning documents. "Over the past 3 weeks, I have successfully secured all the necessary commercial zoning permits from the city council," I explained methodically. "We are going to bulldoze this entire McMansion right down to its concrete foundation. We are going to completely level the ground and build a brand new state-of-the-art facility. My corporate investment group is fully funding the construction of a subsidized tech incubator and secure housing program specifically designed for young displaced African American women." The absolute shock on Yvonne's face was breathtaking. She stumbled backward, her knees visibly buckling under the tremendous weight of my revelation. "I am going to build a safe, supportive environment for young Black women who have been emotionally abused and financially exploited by their own toxic families." I continued, my voice rising with undeniable power. "I am going to provide them with the advanced technological education, financial literacy, and secure housing that they desperately need to build their own independent empires. I am literally destroying the grand monument to your selfish vanity to aggressively create the exact safety net I never had growing up. Every single brick of your fake perfection is going to be crushed into dust to build a solid foundation for women who actually deserve to succeed." Desmond let out a quiet, ragged sob from the doorway, burying his face in his trembling hands. The sheer magnitude of my plan was undeniable. I was not just evicting them. I was permanently erasing their toxic legacy and replacing it with something profoundly meaningful. Yvonne finally realized that her charming manipulation tactics were completely useless. She had absolutely no power left. Her fraudulent golden child was sitting in a federal holding cell facing years in prison. Her retirement savings were entirely gone. Her wealthy social circle had completely abandoned her. Her pristine reputation was ruined beyond repair, and her beloved status symbol was about to be bulldozed into the ground. For the very first time in her entire arrogant life, Yvonne experienced true, undeniable humility. Her legs gave out completely, and she dropped heavily to her knees on the hard concrete porch. The rough stones scraped against her bare skin, but she did not seem to notice the physical pain. She clasped her hands tightly together in front of her chest, looking up at me with tears streaming rapidly down her ruined face. "Kiara, please," she begged, her voice cracking into a raw, pathetic wail. "Please do not do this to me. I have absolutely nowhere else to go. We have no money left for a security deposit on a new apartment. We will be completely homeless on the streets. Please, my beautiful daughter, I am begging you. I am so incredibly sorry for everything I did. I was wrong about the loan. I was wrong about Malik. Please just let us stay in the guest room. I will pay you rent. I will clean the floors. Just do not take my home away from me. Please have mercy on your own mother. I stared down at the weeping woman kneeling pathetically on the concrete porch. I felt a brief fleeting echo of the terrified little girl I used to be. The girl who desperately craved her mother's approval and affection. But that small, quiet echo was instantly silenced by the powerful, independent woman I had fought so incredibly hard to become. I remembered the cold, arrogant smirk on Yvonne's face when she told me to pack my bags at the lake house. I remembered the ruthless manipulation she used to forge my signature and risk my entire life for a criminal. Mercy is a generous gift reserved for people who demonstrate genuine remorse and accountability. Yvonne was not sorry for abusing me. She was only sorry that she had finally been caught and forcefully stripped of her unearned power. I looked at her tear-streaked face one last time. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering resentment. Just a profound, sweeping emptiness that signaled my complete and total emotional detachment from her toxic gravity. I did not offer her a single word of comfort. I did not bend down to help her up from the hard concrete. I simply turned my back on her, leaving her kneeling and sobbing on the porch of the house she no longer owned. I walked calmly across the manicured green lawn, my tailored suit moving smoothly in the gentle morning breeze. I stopped next to the burly demolition contractor, who was holding his laser measuring tool and watching the scene with quiet professional respect. I looked at the large, pristine wooden patio attached to the side of the grand brick house. It was the exact spot where Yvonne used to host her extravagant summer parties and brag loudly about Malik's fake accomplishments while ignoring my presence entirely. I took a deep, cleansing breath of the fresh Georgia air. Start tearing down the patio, I told the contractor, my voice perfectly steady and clear. The heavy diesel engine of the demolition excavator roared to life, shattering the quiet suburban morning. I stood on the manicured lawn and watched the massive metal claws smash directly into the custom wooden patio. The loud crunch of splintering wood echoed across the affluent neighborhood. Yvonne let out a final devastated wail from the front porch, but I did not turn around. I simply walked to my luxury sports car, got inside, and drove back to the city, leaving my toxic past completely behind me. Exactly 72 hours later, the brutal reality of their situation finally set in. Yvonne and Desmond were officially evicted from the Grand Brick Fortress. There were no white-glove moving services this time. There were no careful professionals wrapping their expensive furniture in protective blankets. Because Yvonne had aggressively drained every single penny of her retirement savings to pay off the dangerous underground syndicate and hire a cheap defense attorney, they had absolutely zero financial resources left. Their pristine credit scores were entirely destroyed by the federal investigation and the public foreclosure. I received a comprehensive final report from the property management company detailing their departure. Yvonne and Desmond were forced to pack their remaining personal belongings into flimsy cardboard boxes they begged from a local grocery store and thick black plastic trash bags. The visual contrast was incredibly stark and utterly pathetic. The arrogant matriarch who once demanded I pack my bags and move into a damp basement was now shoving her wrinkled designer dresses into garbage bags on the front lawn. With no viable options left, they were forced to rent a tiny rundown one-bedroom apartment in a highly undesirable neighborhood on the far outer outskirts of the city. The apartment building featured peeling paint, flickering hallway lights, and absolutely no security. The neighborhood was entirely devoid of the lush green lawns and pristine sidewalks Yvonne had worshipped her entire adult life. It was a massive, devastating fall from the elite country club lifestyle Yvonne had sacrificed her own daughter to maintain. Desmond, who had spent his entire life passively enabling her toxic behavior, now sat in absolute silence in a cramped living room, completely broken by the overwhelming consequences of his own cowardice. They had absolutely nothing left to their names except the heavy, suffocating weight of their monumental failure. While my parents were hauling trash bags into a cheap rental van, The federal justice system was finalizing the ultimate fate of the golden child. The local Atlanta news stations eagerly broadcasted the dramatic conclusion of Malik's criminal saga. After failing to secure a high-priced defense attorney, Malik was completely outmatched by the federal prosecutors. The overwhelming mountain of digital evidence I had meticulously provided to the authorities left him with absolutely no viable defense strategy. The judge sentenced Malik to 8 years in a federal penitentiary for massive wire fraud, money laundering, and extensive tax evasion. There would be no early parole for his specific financial crimes. The golden child who had spent his entire adult life stealing from his family and faking his wealth was now wearing a cheap orange jumpsuit. He would spend the rest of his 30s sleeping on a thin cot in a tiny concrete cell, entirely stripped of his rented luxury cars and his fake designer suits. His elaborate house of cards had completely collapsed, crushing him underneath the heavy weight of his own profound arrogance. Tiana, the superficial influencer, who had eagerly participated in my attempted eviction, did not waste a single second mourning Malik's spectacular downfall. The absolute minute Malik was handcuffed at the exclusive restaurant, Tiana immediately went into aggressive damage control mode. She aggressively scrubbed her entire digital footprint. She deleted every single photograph, every tagged post, and every romantic video featuring Malik from all of her social media platforms. She completely erased his existence from her carefully curated public life, as if their engagement had never happened. Within just 2 months, Tiana was proudly flashing a new massive diamond ring on her social media accounts. She had successfully pivoted her aesthetic and was now happily engaged to a prominent professional basketball player. She had found a new wealthy target to fund her lavish lifestyle, entirely forgetting the man she had just planned to marry. Malik was nothing more than a deleted glitch in her relentless pursuit of social status. He had destroyed his family to impress a woman who replaced him before his federal trial even began. The social consequences for Yvonne were equally swift and completely merciless. The elite circles she had worshipped for decades firmly slammed their doors in her face. The wealthy women from her prominent church who had eagerly attended her final praise brunch now actively crossed the street to avoid making eye contact with her. Her exclusive country club membership was quietly revoked. The devastating shame of her felony forgery conviction and her son's highly publicized federal imprisonment left her entirely isolated. The powerful matriarch who once commanded respect through fear and manipulation now possessed absolutely no power, no money, and no golden child to proudly protect. She was completely alone in her tiny rundown apartment, left with nothing but the bitter consequences of her own toxic choices. One quiet Tuesday evening, my personal cell phone buzzed loudly on the sleek marble kitchen island of my Buckhead penthouse. I was pouring myself a glass of expensive red wine, feeling entirely relaxed after a highly productive day at the corporate office. I glanced down at the glowing screen. The caller ID displayed Yvonne's phone number. She had not attempted to contact me since the brutal confrontation on the front porch. I did not answer the call. I simply let it ring until the automated voicemail system picked up the line. A few moments later, a new audio message notification popped onto my digital screen. I picked up my phone and pressed the play button. Yvonne's voice echoed through the quiet penthouse. It was not the commanding, arrogant tone she had used my entire life. It sounded incredibly raspy, weak, and completely defeated. "Kiara," she said, taking a shaky, ragged breath. "I saw the demolition photos online today. The house is completely gone. I am sitting in this horrible tiny apartment, and your father will not even speak to me anymore. My friends will not return my phone calls. Malik is gone. I have absolutely nothing left." She paused, and I could hear her swallowing hard. "I hope you are happy, Kiara. I truly hope you are happy now that you have completely destroyed your own family." The voicemail ended with a sharp click, leaving my penthouse perfectly quiet once again. I stood by the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the glittering Atlanta skyline. I thought about the decades of emotional abuse, the relentless financial manipulation, and the toxic double standards I had endured simply because I was born the daughter instead of the son. I thought about the massive, dangerous debt they tried to bury me under just to save a fraud. I thought about the beautiful, innovative tech center currently being built on the very ground where my trauma used to live. I looked down at the glowing digital audio file on my phone screen. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. I did not feel the desperate lifelong urge to call her back and fix her broken reality. I pressed the red delete button, permanently erasing her voice from my device and my life forever. I took a slow, satisfying sip of my rich red wine. I looked at my beautiful, peaceful sanctuary and smiled. I am happy, I whispered to the empty room, completely and utterly free. Exactly 1 year passed since that liberating evening in my penthouse. The transition from destroying a toxic legacy to building an empowering future required immense dedication and relentless focus. I poured every ounce of my energy into my corporate career and my new philanthropic venture. Today, the bright Georgia sun beat down on a pristine modern facility standing exactly where that pretentious brick McMansion used to be. The Vanguard Tech Center for Women was no longer just an ambitious architectural blueprint or a complicated zoning permit. It was a tangible, breathing reality. The sleek glass windows reflected the lush green landscape, providing a striking, beautiful contrast to the suffocating vanity that once occupied this specific plot of land. I stood at the front entrance holding an oversized pair of shiny silver scissors with a thick emerald green ribbon stretched tightly across the wide double doors. I looked around at the vibrant, excited crowd gathered on the fresh, manicured lawn. I was entirely surrounded by my authentic chosen family. My top executive team from Caldwell Vance Holdings stood proudly in the front row, wearing sharp business suits and bright, encouraging smiles. My closest personal friends, the brilliant, resilient women who had supported my corporate ascent from the very beginning, were cheering loudly. Standing right beside me was my loving, supportive fiancé, holding my hand with quiet, unwavering pride. He never once asked me to shrink my ambitions to accommodate his ego. He celebrated my fierce independence and matched my professional drive perfectly. We had built a beautiful, equal partnership based entirely on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. Most importantly, the cheering crowd was filled with the first official cohort of young, driven African American women accepted into our fully subsidized tech incubator program. Their bright faces beamed with raw hope and fierce, unyielding ambition. They were eager to learn advanced coding, master complex data analytics, and build their own unbreakable financial safety nets. They were talented girls who had experienced family trauma, emotional abuse, and financial displacement. They needed a safe, secure environment to cultivate their skills without fear of exploitation or manipulation. I had successfully replaced a hollow monument to extreme arrogance with a living, breathing sanctuary of genuine empowerment. I was giving them the exact protective foundation I desperately needed when I was their age. The loud, joyful chatter of the gathered crowd washed over me like a warm, healing wave. As I prepared to cut the ceremonial ribbon, I took a profound, quiet moment to deeply reflect on the agonizing but incredibly necessary journey that brought me to this exact spot. Society constantly tells us that we must unconditionally forgive our family members no matter what terrible things happen. People relentlessly repeat the old tired proverb that blood is thicker than water, using it as a heavy emotional chain to keep us firmly bound to generational trauma and endless cycles of abuse. They expect us to silently absorb disrespect, financial exploitation, and blatant favoritism just to maintain a fake image of family unity. But I learned the hard way that sometimes blood is just toxic. Sometimes the people who share your DNA are the exact same people who will happily watch you drown just to keep themselves comfortably afloat. I realized with absolute undeniable certainty that I did not lose my family. I forcefully freed myself from a highly manipulative cult that blindly worshipped a false, fraudulent idol. My mother Yvonne and my brother Malik demanded my total submission. They actively tried to strip away my hard-earned dignity, my peaceful home, and my pristine financial security. They severely underestimated the cold, tactical precision of my analytical mind. I took the heavy, jagged bricks of deception and emotional abuse they ruthlessly threw at my head, and I meticulously used them to build an impenetrable corporate empire. I completely shattered the toxic cycle of enabling and replaced it with a solid foundation of genuine accountability. I no longer carry the crushing, exhausting weight of trying to earn basic love and respect from people who are fundamentally incapable of giving it. I no longer have to hide my computers in the garage or apologize for prioritizing my career over a fraudulent man's fragile ego. I am completely liberated from the heavy, suffocating chains of their endless demands and their pathetic delusions. And the absolute best part of this entire transformative ordeal, I never have to apologize for my massive success ever again. The excited crowd quieted down slightly as I raised the heavy silver scissors. I looked directly at the bright, eager faces of the young women, waiting patiently to step inside their new technological sanctuary. They would learn how to code, how to negotiate massive corporate contracts, and how to securely protect their personal assets. They would learn that their brilliant minds were their most valuable currency. They would never have to compromise their exceptional brilliance for anyone else's comfort. I squeezed the handles of the scissors, snipping the thick emerald green ribbon cleanly in half. The two ends fluttered softly to the concrete walkway. The entire crowd erupted into thunderous, joyful applause. The loud cheering echoed down the affluent suburban street, completely erasing the lingering ghosts of the past. I smiled a massive, genuinely radiant smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated victory over every single obstacle they deliberately placed directly in my way to stop me. I reached out and pushed the heavy glass double doors wide open. The bright sunlight flooded into the sleek modern lobby, illuminating the state-of-the-art computer labs and the collaborative workspaces inside waiting eagerly to be utilized by these incredibly bright young minds. "Welcome to your beautiful new beginning," I announced, projecting my voice clearly over the loud celebratory applause surrounding us. I stepped aside, welcoming the first cohort of brilliant girls into the building. I watched them walk through the doors, leaving my dark, toxic past permanently behind and stepping confidently into a bright, fiercely independent future.